our total knowledge at Threat Tec, of course, is much better than my own. And when we multiply that by an ecosystem, it's even better. So we started something called FutureWorks, which is really a consortium. And FutureWorks includes industry partners, it includes academia and government. And we're looking at the challenges that we will face as a nation. What are the types of things, whether it be manufacturing, whether it be a technological advancement that we're trying to keep pace with, or that we're trying to protect ourselves against?
Hi, everyone, and thank you for listening. I'm your host, Kerrie Jordan. Welcome to our show where we talk with industry leaders in manufacturing. Today, I'm speaking with Jim Crawford, President and CEO of Threat Tec. Now, in his role, he guides the firm to excel in defense contracting with a focus on asymmetric, conventional, and informational warfare. Under his leadership, Threat Tec has become integral to both Army futures and training and doctrine commands, known for its top-tier red teaming capabilities across the United States. Now, Threat Tec is an organization that is passionate about enabling and supporting the interests of the United States and its allies. The company specializes in delivering comprehensive insights and dynamic depictions of perceived threats, ensuring clients stay one step ahead in a very fast-changing world. So I'm looking forward to this conversation very much. I think that this impacts all of us. Jim, welcome, and thank you for joining the show.
Thanks, Kerrie. Thanks. Glad to be here. Looking forward to this.
So am I. So as we get started, I think it'd be great to first get to know you and to get to know Threat Tec. Can you share your background and who Threat Tec is and what you do?
So my background's less interesting than Threat Tec, but I'll tell you. So born in the Midwest, went into the Army after high school. Had a great time, great experience with that. Was an Army infantryman. Went off to some really fun, cool schools there, and on my way out, thought I would never say hello to the Army again, right? And surprise, life has a way of surprising us. Became a builder for 20 years in the commercial industrial sector. And in the downturn of 2007, we took a transition and went into some government contracting totally by happenstance. And along the way, met some really interesting people. And who would know that your old life in the Army had some application into a future 20 years later? So here we are, and I'm so glad that I did, because our defense folks are some of the best folks to work with. Great people, great mission, and what's better and more honorable than protecting the ideas of the United States of America? So it's a great group to work with, and we really enjoyed that team. And at Threat Tec, we've really focused ourselves on four different areas that we call our pillars. And the first pillar is intelligence and the operational environment and threat. So you can imagine that the operational environment makes up just about every part of the world, and the threat depends on what we're talking about, or what portion of the world we may need to operate in. And it's not always something as ominous as a war. It could be non-state actors, criminal elements, folks who are thinking adversely about the interests of the United States. So imagine a humanitarian mission somewhere, and they want to take the things that we're trying to give the people, and they want to take them and sell those things, right? So we have to think about threats that are criminal in nature, as well as, of course, our state actors, and then those non-state actors like you've seen ISIS and folks like that around the world. Our second pillar is wargaming and simulation. So imagine that you first think about, here's the problem set, here's the operational environment, here's the threat. Now we depict that in a simulation or a war game. And a threat emulation company is really our expertise at Threat Tec. So we'll emulate that threat for all levels of service components as they do war games and simulations. Our third pillar kind of comes from that. So now we've taken this information, we've actualized it, created a war game or a simulation around it, and now there's some data that comes out. So data visualization and data storytelling becomes the third pillar. So imagine we're trying to You don't just study things to study them. You study them to change or to learn or to make significant strides in your training environment. So we'll take that information and we project that to the folks who need it, and they share it, carefully and in the right places. And then our last, and probably the reason we're here today, is mission engineering. So our mission engineering includes a number of things from rapid prototyping to machining. We have a pretty interesting, if I were a kid again and I dreamt of building a mad scientist lab, I think we've done it. We've done it. We've been asked to do some things like, in Hollywood, we've made guns for the James Bond cars, the Batmobile, different things of that nature, as well as we've made systems that support the U.S. military and our foreign partners. So those are really interesting components of what we do at Threat Tec. And while we're not a true uh, line sort of block and line manufacturer, we manufacture in small batches and prototypes to really think through hard problems.
I always wondered where the Batmobile came from. Now we know.
Now there's a tie back. Well, we didn't build the Batmobile, of course, but we have built a number of really fun things that go inside things like the Batmobile. We're in, I think the last count I was given, over 150 movies are simulators. So it's pretty cool.
Wow. Yes. Can you talk a little bit more about mission engineering? Because that's not a term that, we've talked about on the show before. It's not one that I'm very familiar with. Can you just explain that a bit more?
Yeah, so I think the lexicon will be important here, and to
Mhm.
say there could be lots of meaning behind mission engineering. For us, it's our fourth vertical, and it's simply we want our employees, our partners, our team to really be focused on the mission at hand. Whatever our customer's mission is, we think it's really important that we carry that mission forward. So we're working within our team, and we said, boy, what can we do to really emphasize that when we're talking about our engineering capability? And one of our partners came in and said, I think we should call it mission engineering. And that's how we got the name. But the reason it really is fitting is that the things that they do inside mission engineering are always trying to develop the next step for our forces, right? How can we identify a better, faster, cheaper, more austere way to do things than we were doing it yesterday, than our competitors do it, than our competitors on the global scale do it.
I
So that's mission engineering.
I see. I see. Okay, great. So, with your background in the military and defense and strategic operations, how has this influenced your view of modern manufacturing, and what can manufacturing sort of take away from that sort of experience? What have you seen?
One thing that we've seen in the U.S. and gosh, in my too many years of business is that we've seen so many capabilities leave the U.S. and be offshore. And one thing that I think strategically is important to the US is that we bring back more manufacturing capability here at home, as well as things like material stores. It was a very strange experience for all of us to go through COVID. But I think we realized during COVID just how reliant we are on these foreign partners and producing our parts and pieces. And that's fine for a lot of things. And we encourage, of course, free trade. I'm all about free trade. But there are things that we think of in the strategic, toolbox that really need to be made or fabricated here at home, so that we have ready access, at least in terms of alternatives. And unfortunately, if you think about scalability, some of these things have a single customer, a single buyer. And if the buyer starts splitting those purchases and taking them offshore, it makes it hard to really justify having a business here in the States that supports that. So one of the things that we've learned is that we need to do more of it here at home, right? And that's probably what caused us to get into this side of the business. We were being asked to replicate some foreign capabilities, and in doing that, we just realized there is no place that we can do this other without it being an import. There's no person to call. So we took that on. So as we think about places that the strategy for manufacturing needs to really be carefully thought through, it's around any of these pieces that tie back to our military, or certainly key strategic components. What we have seen is when we look at denied access into areas and we think about how the military will project itself in certain places, like I said, for a humanitarian mission or otherwise, there are places in the world now that we are much more separated than we are in Europe and Asia, where we have land connections. But if we look at the Pacific, we have islands and lots of blue water between locations. So the idea of logistics and the ability to manufacture close to the edge of the action becomes really important. So mobile manufacturing is something that is certainly on everyone's mind. How can we project forward these capabilities so that they're at the point of need? And then how do we get that training into, say, a soldier, a sailor, an airman, so that they're able to do these things and not just the hobbyist, but they're really a trained machinist or they're a trained fabricator and they can come in and do the pieces and manufacture the parts and components or combine the pieces that are needed in an effective and efficient way. So there's just lots of different things that have come to light over the last 10 or 15 years as the world changes. And we look forward to those types of challenges, and we all are thinking through inside DoD. It's a steady conversation. Additive manufacturing, what can be done with additive manufacturing, how, even there we have issues, we have challenges. We were talking just a little bit before the show started about, cyber challenges, right? So security and all of those things now are components, kind of new issues, new challenges that we didn't think of 15, 20 years ago.
I really see how that experience has helped you kind of, see through the variety of implications and then, really hone in on a very effective and efficient way to solve for challenges while still being cognizant of the impact of each one of those. So if I can ask you from a leadership perspective, how has this experience, sort of shaped your approach to manufacturing leadership? And that could be, how you lead Threat Tec. It could be how you encourage other organizations to lead. How has it shaped your approach?
Well, there's a couple of things that I'll share with you. And one thing you realize is that for me, our total knowledge at Threat Tec, of course, is much better than my own. And when we multiply that by an ecosystem, it's even better. So we started something called FutureWorks, which is really a consortium. And FutureWorks includes industry partners, it includes academia and government. And we're looking at the challenges that we will face as a nation. What are the types of things, whether it be manufacturing, whether it be a technological advancement that we're trying to keep pace with, or that we're trying to protect ourselves against? I mean, there's all this talk about AI. There's all this talk about autonomous systems. And, if you listen to the news, it sounds like pretty soon none of us are going to have jobs because machines are going to do it all. I don't think that that's true myself. I think that what it's going to do is like the Industrial Revolution freed up time and space for us to take on other pursuits. We're going to find ourselves reaching for new heights, finding new things, and some of the mundane parts that we've really had as dangerous jobs or as things that are more difficult to do, or perhaps things that cause physical impairment over time. Those things can be sent to machines easily, and machines are repairable, unlike us humans. So there are really, you know, several things that make us change our thought process and how we collect information before we make a decision. So pre all of this, I would have thought through a process using one of the models, the thinking models, to say, all right, I'll do a fishbone diagram and we'll look at where this problem is. Now, what I really find is much more effective is to use the collective knowledge and to grab, thoughts from a really cross-functional team. There's a lot of companies that do design thinking. We've incorporated design thinking at Threat Tec. And I think of those really great design thinking companies and how they do this and how they apply. An architect can sometimes give you an answer for a machining problem, right? A painter can look at a machining problem and say, have you thought about that? So there are all sorts of different viewpoints, and we love the idea of kind of mushing a bunch of people together to get collective thought and see how we come up with a solution that's inventive. And sometimes it's one of those that our engineers following a linear thinking model would never get to. And that way, I think the leadership has to be much more open to input. It doesn't mean we do, the crazy things, but we listen to what some of these crazy ideas are because they really may help us turn a corner. And while, a thought that may seem to be an outlier may not stimulate everybody in the room, but it may stimulate the right person to say, that's not it. But that's 1 degree separate from where we're going. And if we do this, boy, you really helped me solve a problem. So I think, we see kind of this collective thought as being very powerful.
And I can imagine that it takes strong leadership to create the safe space to be able to even feel comfortable to put those crazy ideas out there. Because you're right. I mean, it could be that's the next step. That's how you get closer to solving something. So that's great. Well, can I ask you about, speaking of innovation and ideas, when it comes to Threat Tec and the digital technologies and the way that you drive innovation through technology, what are some of the ways in which you're leveraging maybe emerging technology or different types of digital technologies to enhance operational efficiency, to create new revenue opportunities? What does technology mean to Threat Tec?
Well, I'll tell you, there's a funny thing, Kerrie. When we first came into the defense space, and you do a war game, there's this, and I'll try to paint a word picture so you can kind of imagine this. There's this back and forth sort of chess game that happens between what we call blue forces and red forces. And the blue guys are the good guys, the red guys are the bad guys. We typically depict the bad guys. So when we're going through the back and forth, there might be a PowerPoint slide that sounds like it would sound a lot like a chess match to you, right? This piece to that position on the board, haha, and then someone comes, well, if you do that, then I'll do this, and it's back and forth. You can imagine that leaves a very difficult mental picture to capture. And we were in a briefing many years ago when H.R. McMaster, who was in the previous Trump administration, General McMaster, and he said, guys, the common operating picture is so important that we all have a common vision at what we're talking about, what the problem is, what the problem set looks like. So now to your technology question, the first thing that really did this for us was AR, VR, and 3D visualizations. So what we started to do, and one of the areas that Threat Tec really thrives in, is telling the story of what's happening or what's potentially happening. So if we're running through, scenario play is the consistent thread in a war game. What happens if this happens? What happens if that happens? What happens if we're 25 years in the future and there's a new slingamabob that's a new technology that none of us were thinking about? And think about that. That's a really hard job to have as DoD leaders that have to chase down, what are the things that nobody's thinking about? Strategic shocks, strategic surprises. There's a new capability. If you remember the Men in Black movie, they pull out that little gun and it's the tiniest gun and it has the most lethal performance of anything in the armor, right? So these are the types of real life problems that DoD faces every day. If we can help them visualize something that hasn't been invented yet, what happens when there's a hover tank? It doesn't worry about the ground it's driving over. It can go over water, it can go over land, it can climb a mountain, whatever. This creates a different shift in the way we fight and win wars, or the way we protect our people. So all of these things and visualizations become very important to that. From the first person view, if I put an AR headset on and now I'm riding on that hover tank and I see what it feels like to fly in a hover tank, to the first person view, I'm on the other side of that and I see, oh my goodness, here comes a hover tank, right? So this has a way of connecting all of our thoughts and design energy very quickly into solving a problem. So I love the use of tools that help us capture a common visualization. I fear that what if we don't visualize all the right things, right? But even exercising ourselves to be able to go outside the norm, suspend rules that we think are hard and fast. Maybe all the rules of physics won't apply at some point. Maybe there's a new structure that we haven't discovered yet that does something that we haven't seen or don't understand. I'm sure it's true, but we have to think through those sorts of things as we're trying to model and build out ways to survive and thrive in the future. So beyond that, I'll tell you the AI tools, if we like to think of ourselves at Threat Tec as a data-centric organization, so we want to make decisions based on the data, but we also want to leave room for the gut feeling. So, when the military talks about this, we talk about the art and science of warfare. So the science, of course, is the data. The art is, how does the artist view that data, and how can the artist manipulate the chess pieces to get a different outcome? And one thing you discover is there's not a common, it's not like there's an operating manual. There are plenty of operating manuals, but it's not like everyone follows every page of every operating manual. You'll find decision makers who make the decisions from the gut because they've seen it 2,000, 10,000, 20,000 times. And you'll find folks who, with trepidation, want to go to the data. Let me see what the data says. So think about the NFL. You're watching a football game on Sunday, and only a few years ago, there was no such thing as the AI tool that would help them decide what to do, right? Oh, it's a run play right up the middle, right? That's what the AI suggests we do this play. So imagine that 1,000 times a minute on a battlefield with a lot of complexity, and each one of those pieces having the ability to outthink the next move of the other. So predictive modeling, analytics, all become really important to how we see and understand. So for anybody who's watching this, thinking about what to do with their kids, think about STEM. Boy, our young men and women really need to be re-encouraged to go and look at science and technology programs. There's so much cool stuff to do these days. It's not like you're going to be stuck somewhere with a pocket protector. You might be 3D printing with carbon fiber. You might be making an exoskeleton. Who knows? There's so many opportunities in that space that I tell you, I'm excited, and I'm excited for our country and the possibility of just advancement over the next 25 years.
Gosh, I would love to be a fly on the wall in every one of your conversations. I can't imagine a hover tank. Yeah, but you're right, and it is exciting to think of, what our next generation of leaders could accomplish, with this kind of technology, with the ability to now connect and to even come together in these kinds of spaces and have these kinds of conversations, really creating new and innovative solutions to some very tough problems that have plagued us for so long. So that's really exciting to hear. Can I ask you, when it comes to the data, as you said, Threat Tec being an organization that does like to, has a culture of referring to the data to make decisions, where does that data come from? Like, how are you collecting and ensuring that the data that you have will help in these conversations that sounds like could be pretty far off, but absolutely need to be planned for because it could happen? How do you make sure that the data is reliable, trustworthy, or maybe it's not? Gosh, maybe you have to estimate. How do you manage the data?
There's two answers to that question. I'll give you both, and they're kind of the left and right thoughts in my world.
Mhm.
There's a group of people who believe building data lakes and holding lots of information from the past allows us to sort of predict the future. That's a little bit of a clumsy model these days, right? Because, if you're going to create data that you can really make decisions from, certain things have to be true, right? I have to know that the data is relevant. So if I put two pots of data together, they have to have been captured around the same ideas and the same collection methods with the same assumptions made as we kind of are building out those data, the same rules. Unfortunately, because information is ubiquitous now, we live in a sensor-full world. There are some countries that you can't walk down the street outside without being on video, right? So that's a form of data. There's a lot of data coming there. And imagine the patterns that that's collecting. It's telling you the busiest times of day. It's telling you the foot traffic on the sidewalk, the road traffic on the streets. it's telling you how much weight an approximation, how much weight is going across that road. So there's a lot of things that are being captured and collected. And because we have these great tools, we're piling up data. The methods, however, haven't been standardized in a way that everyone agrees, hey, we're going to collect it like this. So imagine, one sensor collects it this way, another sensor another, different anomalies, different allowances, tolerances, whatever. So the data is not really clear and crystal in its usability. So it's not truly, you could homogenize the data, but it's really not milk from the same cow, right? It's different.
I think that's helpful because I think a lot of companies might feel hesitation to even use that kind of data, but to know that it will be directionally correct. It will help you at least make decisions, and know that the kind of data that you're working with might have this. It might not be fully complete, but that shouldn't prevent you from trying this out and looking to see what could be possible.
It'll give you a data point, right?
Exactly.
So the other side of that, though, Kerrie, is that now with AI, as Dr. Thomas Sandholm would tell you, you don't need those data lakes anymore because you can have the AI run 10,000 simulations and you can get new data, right?
Yeah.
So it's fresh data collected the same way. So I think it all depends on what you're trying to do and on how you as a person or you as your project believe that the tolerances need to remain. If this is a very sensitive project, you may want to take Dr. Sandholm's approach and say, okay, we're going to do this exact methodology over a period of time, and we know we'll have some really clean data and we'll know all the assumptions we made. But maybe it's just something like about how many people go down that street a week. That's different.
Great point. It is probably very dependent upon the specific scenario or project. And if I could ask you for some additional advice in terms of manufacturing processes, because your organization, I feel like, is fairly unique in that you do have this focus on, of course, threat detection, emulation, as well as manufacturing. So, how do you ensure that your manufacturing processes are resilient against, potential disruptions, against potential cybersecurity attacks, and how do you recommend other manufacturers protect their resilience?
I'll tell you, cyber awareness is really the responsibility of every company these days. And if you are working anywhere with important information, whether it be PII on your employees, personal information about your employees, or you're working with plans and, you know, certainly IP from the company, there are people in this world who want to get it and take it from you for free. There are people who want to lock you out of your computers and your systems and make you pay to get back in. So these are really challenging times because a few years back, our CTO and myself, we were invited out to Microsoft, and they took us on a tour, and they showed us kind of their cyber response capabilities. And we went through that with them, and we spent some time, and we had the opportunity to speak on a software product that we were developing at Threat Tec that actually lives on Azure in one of the instances today, and see what their defense and intelligence leaders thought, and gave us some really good back and forth. But one of the things that we noticed is that, the first piece of advice is you've really got to spread this idea across every member in the company. And it's not just the idea that, hey, they're cyber bad guys because they hear that, but you really have to focus on training. There are so many malware attacks, so many things. One of the methods that used to be very common for espionage is a bad guy, a bad actor would leave a thumb drive in your parking lot. Well, what does everybody want to do if they get hey, there's this really nice thumb drive and it says, private personal pictures, do not look, right? Whatever.
Right.
They want to go plug it into their computer. And then the next thing you know, you've just installed the virus for the bad actor. And now they're walking through the back door using your passwords. They've got your credit cards, all those things. So, and there are lots of different ways that they do that. But you've got to really be vigilant that just like in war, thousands of years ago, there were two guys who were upset with each other and they were standing across the field and they were hurling rocks at each other. And the guy that won was the guy who could throw the farthest and the hardest, right?
Mhm.
Because he had standoff, he had a distance from the threat. And this rule has continued throughout history, that we develop and we iterate. So there's a cause and an effect, a cause and an effect. So we iterate through history with cyber as well. So you can't train your folks on what was yesterday. You have to train them on what's today, tomorrow, and the day after. And they're going to experience a lot of changes, a lot of differences as the bad guys get smarter, they get stronger, they throw the rocks farther. So training becomes really incumbent upon the employer, and then at the individual level to realize, hey, I'm protecting not just the company, not just my own secrets, but I'm really protecting the people that I work with, our partners, our customers, and I need to be thinking of that seriously and carefully, because there are literally thousands of people, and this comes back to the Microsoft story. They have a great set up in one of their rooms where there's a map, and it shows all the cyber attacks that are happening in real time. And you can see these, and they look like little flashpoints, on the map. And I thought it was like a Christmas light display. I thought there's a lot of lights. So this has nothing to do with Microsoft. It's just their ability to watch and see somebody's trying to get into a network that they don't belong in. Somebody's trying to do this. And those sorts of things become, you know, elevated to such a number that you've really got to constantly be thinking and being aware of this. And then, of course, having the right protocols in place, the right technology so that you're checking these systems. And in the defense world, we have the CMMC certification, which went live in December. So it's a requirement that we meet CMMC. I'm glad they're doing it. It's tough for all companies to deal with because it creates more layers. But I'll tell you, we've got a lot of bad guys out there that are trying to get our stuff.
And CMMC, we should spell out for everybody, cybersecurity maturity model certification.
Yes, that's right.
Yep. Something that we are tracking as well for our aerospace and defense organizations that we work with. To your point, like everybody is responsible. And I like that you said it's not just about protecting your own information, but you are responsible for protecting your coworkers, your customers, your partners, those within your ecosystem. So it's so much bigger than you. There is a large responsibility on every one of us to be vigilant. Can we talk about trends? Like, so if you were to look out into the future and think about, the sort of technologies that are emerging, what do you think will have a large actually, I love asking you this question because you already told me hover tanks. So we really could go anywhere with this. But what are you thinking, might make a big impact in the next few years?
I'll say OpenAI has been a huge game changer to the world. I think I write better emails now because of OpenAI, right? I think like I have a little person on my shoulder, a little advisor on my shoulder now with OpenAI. And that's just a large language model. If we follow and believe the trends and the words that they're putting out, then the most recent story that's been given is that this week, I think, they announced that they will get to artificial general intelligence this year. So AGI, and if you understand the difference, right? The large language models are guessing the next word. So we've been using those for a long time. Anybody who's used spell check or used any of the tools on a lot of the word processors, they're already fixing things. They're guessing the next word you want to type. When you go to Amazon and you order something and it says, oh, and maybe you would like this, right? That's those large language models helping you to shop, really. I mean, it's a convenience. But when we get to artificial general intelligence, now we have something that's thinking before you. And it's saying, oh, you haven't thought of this yet, but here's what you need. A little scary, little bit, we all dream about the rogue version of this, right? What was the movie with Arnold Schwarzenegger where we end up with the Terminators, moving around? So obviously it's terrifying. And look, I don't think we have to be worried about as much about just the AGI. We definitely should be cautious and very careful about it. We should be even more cautious before we combine AGI with robotics. So when you have a smart computer, at the end of the day, it's still a computer. It sits on a desk, it's in an office, it's in a building. It's not going to get up and paint your house purple, right? When you add the functional movement to it, and if you've seen the Boston Dynamics robots, right, you've seen that those guys are doing parkour now, right? I mean,
Yeah.
they are doing incredible things, balancing on beams, shooting. Okay, now I'm a little scared if we put AGI with the Boston Dynamics robot that, okay, who's programming that initially to set at least the protocols, right? What are the rules that can't work left or right from? So there are things there, but I do believe that AGI is going to offer some real game-changing capabilities. I don't know what it's I wish I could peer into the future that deeply to say what's it going to mean. I know that OpenAI claims that they will actually have impact this year, and of course it will. I mean, because once you turn that switch on, it's like the smartest employee you've ever had times a million who never wants to go to sleep and only wants to learn. That's a very hard thing. Plus, it has a million friends that it can talk to, and they're all working together now. That's intense. But think about the potential for us to understand new things of healthcare breakthroughs. Maybe even some more simple things. What if we solve some really big problems with some really smart answers that we've just overlooked because we've been caught in a particular lens that we see the world through. So I think there's a lot of opportunity, a lot of possibility, room for concern. No question. We're the threat guys. I'm definitely going to have concern over this, but there's promise and there's hope there too.
And how do you think leaders can best prepare for this kind of future?
We have to be careful, right? Sometimes our
Mm.
politicians make rules and they believe that they can create a law that says, hey, you can't do that. Well, that's problematic in itself, right? And we saw in Adam Smith, back in the days of Wealth and Nations, Adam Smith said there's a silent hand that moves capital and around where it's most efficiently deployed, right?
Yeah.
And no government can control that because what happens, right? If you're taxed in one place to a point that you can't bear it, you stop that business. It doesn't mean you'll move, but that need still exists. And somebody else says, hey, there's a great opportunity here. I'll build this business and I'll do this thing here. So suddenly the capital's following it there and it's happening. AI and any of the technological advancements create an even different problem. Because before, when we were talking about machinery and equipment, we had places, big places, factories, you had to have power, you had to have factory, you had to have security. Now I can have a laptop and I can live on a boat and I can make some nefarious stuff happen that that is problematic for as a non-state actor, right? I can impact. So you can't tell the genie makers that they can't make genies. They'll be made. The genies will be made and the bottles will be open. So what we have to find here, and leaders have to do this efficiently and effectively. I think it's wrong to try to fight it because it's going to happen. I think that what we have to figure out is how can we embrace it and how can we create the guardrails that protect us and how can we reason with the folks who would use it irrationally. It's a very difficult problem because it doesn't require a big footprint to do. You could have an actor in a basement, anywhere in the world with the
Mhm.
capability to design and build these types of intelligences. Now they've got to have power still. There's still other things that they have to do, but it's not like building an aircraft carrier, right? You don't have to have a port and 5,000 people to help you put it together.
So true. So true. Well, Jim, as we are wrapping up, gosh, are there any final thoughts? Anything that you wanted to share that I didn't ask you about?
I'll say two things. One, thanks so much for asking us on the show, and really appreciate what you're doing. It's very nice to see programs like yours where you're engaged. Manufacturing is important in America, and it used to be the bedrock of America. And in the past, it has been one of the stalwarts that has protected us from foreign battles. We've been able to respond. World War II is a great example. Attack on Pearl Harbor, we're able to manufacture and bring ourselves up to speed very quickly to compete with a German and Japanese war machine that were much more developed in terms of systems and equipment. But we did it very quickly. At one time, you could walk from Mare Island in California, way up in the Napa River, all the way to San Francisco, and never step off of a ship. And that's a long way. It's a long run. And we were building, I think, a ship every 3 days. So there is certainly talent and know-how in America to do these things. We've got to bring that back. And that's important for us. It doesn't mean we have to do everything. I'm not proposing that, but we need to do some things and we need to do them very well. And lastly, just a story of hope. I'm hopeful for the American people. I'm hopeful for not just our country as we emerge and or break into really this AI time. There are going to be opportunities that none of us have thought about. And as an entrepreneur, that excites me. I see them, think of the machining and tooling equipment that's here today, and its capabilities are just so incredible compared to what existed even 15 years ago, even 10 years ago. And now we have all these magnificent things that come together. I can only imagine what the next 50 years will look like. So we might have that hover tank yet.
Yes. Well said. This is such an honorable industry, and I am so glad to be a part of it. And it's really exciting to talk with folks like you who also feel that way and encourage others to be a part of it too. So, and as you said, there is so much to come with AI and what's going to be happening in our future. We're on the brink of greatness. And, for all of those who are concerned about it, I mean, I think it's completely understandable, but I encourage them to lean in, be a part of it, help it go in the direction that you feel is the right direction for it to go in. Don't just sit back and let it happen. Be a part of the change. So it's been such a pleasure to talk with you. Thank you so much.
Right on. Thanks.
For anyone who wants to learn more about you or Threat Tec, where would you direct them?
ThreatTec.com or FutureWorks.com is another one. And that's works, WERX.com.
Excellent. We will link to those on our show notes. Thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure.
Thank you.
All right. That was Jim Crawford, President and CEO of Threat Tec. And to everyone listening, thank you for being a part of the future of manufacturing.